Hi, my sweetie darlings. How are you doing? I have a special surprise. So it didn't come in this. I'm just using it as a protective case. But this is the new ArtuPool wireless mic system. How cute. So we're going to test it out in this video. I'm going to hook it up and you're going to hear the difference. But let's take a moment to just admire how cute this is. It's a jelly kind of translucent case, glossy, and it's got two microphones, lovely wireless lapel microphones. Switch on, and we are going to hook this up now. Okay, and I am testing it at the moment, so it is absolutely adorable. Look at that. So cute. So it can basically hook on to your clothes. And I hope that sounds okay. I wanted to kind of talk about this microphone case. It is so cute. There is a second mic in case you want to do like interview or like have other people join a podcast or something. And the case has the battery level shown on the front, which is so cute, and highly recommend this. So today I went to a cafe with my sweetheart and we were just studying alongside each other. Well, he's preparing for more interviews and stuff like that. I'm the one that's studying, but we just call it studying or working, whatever. And we ordered lots of pastries and drinks from there too. I had an iced chai, then I had an iced matcha. It's so delicious. It's at a place called Paris Baguette. Paris Baguette. It is a French-themed Korean cafe. There's lots of Korean French cafes around here for some reason, but lots to choose from. So if any of you are interested in this cool wireless lavalier lapel microphone set, I will link it below. It comes in 3 different colors. It comes in pink, black, and white. I ordered the white one originally, by the way, and it wasn't as nice. The finish was more of a satin, and it looked more like a dingy grey white. It wasn't that nice of a colour. So I highly recommend the black or the pink ones. Just FYI. I've been doing a lot of studying competition law, quite interesting. So this is my new book, The Competition Law 2023, and it's been really interesting reading post-Brexit rules. I have to know all three. I have to know the UK competition law, EU competition law, and the US antitrust law and competition authorities, how all three deal with it, because a lot of the time there is crossover, especially with international multi-level companies that span borders. So we have to know how to apply all three, when they each apply, and it's really interesting kind of like reading the relationship between all three different competition authorities. So I really enjoy it, and I'm really considering being a competition lawyer. I really enjoy this kind of, it's so interesting to me. So yeah, for example, I heard of the largest fine in the history of competition law. Google was fined 4.7 billion euros for infringing competition law. So it's really interesting. It had to do with Android and Meta. So it was something to do with the search engines. I don't know the exact details, but yeah, they were 5 to fine. For those of you who don't know what competition law is, it's basically about the market between undertakings, sometimes individuals within the undertakings. Sometimes the authorities can go after the individuals, and sometimes they'll go after the undertaking completely. You're not infringing just because you're dominant, but basically it's when an undertaking is in a dominant position and abuses their dominant position, which can distort or has a risk of distorting the competition, which sometimes you get agreements that can encourage competition, which is good, but other times you get agreements which can hinder or harm competition, which is bad. So every country has its own authorities, but obviously with the EU, they have to abide by the European Union law. So they have what is called the TFEU, and that's the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union. It's Article 101 and 2. Those are the main authoritative provisions that govern competition law in the EU. So even though they have their separate national competition authorities, the overall obviously is the European Commission, and they will have the NCA's, national competition authorities, within each EU member state, and they will work alongside the European Commission and deal with different levels of infringement. European Commission doesn't deal with individual infringement, they deal with overall undertakings, but the national competition authorities of each member state will deal with individual infringements. So even if you don't know what I'm talking about, I hope this is relaxing anyway, because some of you have asked for more videos of where I'm just like talking. Sometimes it's ASMR when people are explaining things to you. One of my very first ASMR experiences as a child was not just like sounds, but when the teacher explains something to me, especially when they're like leaning over me and they're like pointing to a book, sometimes I'd almost fall asleep. Or like I'd zone out because it was so like it put me in a trance. Like so funny. It's so funny like to try and explain to someone who's never experienced ASMR and they're like, "What, you just fall asleep?" Is it like having what is that disease where you just fall asleep? I can't even think of the name, but I'm like, no, it's not like that. It's just kind of like it almost puts you into like I wouldn't say a comatose state, but it's so relaxing that like you just kind of like, and then I would zone out and not pay attention to what the teacher's actually saying because it was just like but anyway, it helps me to actually talk about this when I'm studying for this exam, so I hope you guys don't mind. I know I have some law student viewers. I have more law student viewers on my other channel, but I know I have some law student viewers on this ASMR channel as well. Some of you have like commented, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that I actually had law student viewers on my ASMR channel because it has nothing to do with law, but I've been kind of incorporating it in anyway just because I thought sometimes people like the notes, and obviously with me studying law, my notes are going to all be law, and I thought it's perfect. It's so boring. It should put people to sleep and it should help relax people because it's so bloody boring. It's not relaxing if you're listening to something interesting because you're going to stay alert and awake. I'm just going to ramble on about things I've been learning. So right now I'm learning about horizontal agreements. I've done vertical agreements. So there's like two types of agreements when it comes to competition. Horizontal ones are much more harmful generally. They can be much more harmful. The most harmful and pernicious of agreements, which some guy, he's like this major figure in competition law, I can't even remember his name right now, but he said cartels are the most pernicious of agreements. People, when I've mentioned this before in my other videos, when it came to like my note reading, people think cartel, they think of the Mexican cartel, but that's not actually what it is. Even though they're known as the cartel, it's because of the nature of what they were doing is like territorial monopoly, abuse of dominant power, abuse of dominant position, and basically pushing the little guys out. So a cartel can arise in a lot of different situations when it comes to business and undertakings, and basically cartels are the most harmful of agreements when it comes to competition law. And obviously they're not going to be formal because they're generally legal, and they are so harmful to competition generally that people even consider cartels as basically robbing, just basically stealing, like theft, because it's impactfully harmful to overall competition in the market. So I'm learning about cartels and things like that right now, and often cartel agreements can be, under the table, almost left unsaid. sometimes people can have parallel agreements which resemble cartels, but they didn't know. And that's very hard to prove. Sometimes you have to kind of like show proof. And even if you do show proof that it was innocent and two people at the same level were not colluding, a lot of the time it's a very high threshold to prove that they weren't. But they look at your history, they look at conversations, they look the competition authorities have a lot of power to do the investigations and look into all different kinds of agreements, whether it's vertical or horizontal. But horizontal agreements are usually the most risky ones because they are between competitors at the same level of the supply or distribution chain, and that can affect the market a lot. Whereas vertical agreements can be less harmful because that's different levels of the supply and distribution chain, like supplier, manufacturer, and some of those vertical agreements can actually be beneficial to competition. But it's when it comes to the same level competitors going into agreements that can be very, very harmful. So I also learned that in the UK we used to have dawn raids, which basically is when, some of you don't know this, but in competition they have their own authorities, almost like the bloody SWAT team police that are allowed to come in. If you are under the EU, and this used to be allowed in the UK as well, but now because of Brexit, dawn raids are actually not allowed in the UK anymore. But basically it's when competition authorities, it's like the police for competition, can show up. Your undertaking is under investigation and they have a right to come at a warrant. They'll already have a warrant because the courts would have already granted it if the Competition Markets Authority had enough evidence against your undertaking. They could just show up, flip your office upside down, I don't know how else to put it. They can confiscate files of any type of media that you have files stored on in relevance to the investigation, and you're not allowed to, you can get fined heavily if you refuse to cooperate. They can seal off parts of your office so they can go searching for what they need to search for. They can question anyone involved, or even third parties who don't work for the companies but who are somewhat involved with the company. They're allowed to question, they're allowed to record any answers. They have a lot of power. So anyone under the EU is enabled by European law to apply this power when it comes to an undertaking that's being investigated. So we learn that, you know, it's very important for companies, especially large corporations, to take steps to make sure they aren't breaking any European competition law, especially the EU, because they have so much, you know, it's not centralized. It is, they have power over everything, and they can even work with other European member states for another jurisdiction. Well, it's not considered another, I mean, technically another jurisdiction, but if it's an EU member state, another country basically. So they can help each other. When it comes to American competition and antitrust, it's governed by the Sherman Act, mainly Article 1 and Article 2, yes, of the Sherman Act. And then they have the Clayton Act as well. So even though dawn raids aren't allowed in America either, because you guys are protected by the Constitution, you don't allow dawn raids. There are things that they can do. They can wiretap under certain circumstances, and they can even hire informants and even look up phone numbers that the company has called and investigate anyone behind phone numbers and things like that. And they can even set up surveillance cameras and have you watched. But these are all regulated. There's a limit on the extent that they can go with these wiretaps and things like that. But this is just an example of the extent, like it can be very, very detrimental to the overall market if certain companies are infringing competition laws. So it's really, really interesting. Anyway, it's almost been 20 minutes, so I am going to go. If you guys like this kind of video, let me know. I hope you like this new microphone. Let me know what you think of it. Or if you prefer the other one, I'm really interested to know what you guys think. My channel is still very small, so I'm trying to kind of like grow it as much as I can, even though with my study schedule and things like that. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in